It happened at the end of our family retreat. The sun was dipping low over Grant's private lakeside property, casting long shadows across the wooden dock where we had spent most of the afternoon laughing and trading stories. I was stuffing the last of our towels into the faded canvas duffel bag, the scent of pine and damp earth drifting in on a gentle breeze. Elise bent over to grab her purse behind me, her dark hair brushing the back of my hand. I reached to zip my bag, and that's when I saw it. Grant stepped past her with a casual swagger, slid his hand down her hip, and cupped her backside in a movement so swift it resembled a whisper in a crowded room. His fingers lingered there for a heartbeat before he pulled away, as though testing the surface of something forbidden. In that instant, time fractured. The world around me went silent. I heard Elise's laughter from a moment before, bright and carefree. I heard the water lapping at the pilings below, the distant rattle of oars on a canoe. But more vividly than any of that, I heard the thud of my own heart, pounding in my ears like a warning drum. My breath caught in my chest, and I froze. The bag slipped from my grasp, hitting the dock with a dull thump, but I could not move. My eyes followed Grant's retreating back, the way he didn't look over his shoulder, and then locked on Elise's face, her face calm, even amused, a gentle curve of a smile dancing at the corners of her lips. She didn't flinch. She didn't step away. She didn't scold him or lift her voice. She let him touch her in a way that belonged to me, and then she smiled. That one moment broke something inside me, an invisible thread of trust one didn't even know was fragile until it snapped. The hum of conversation among our cousins, the clink of cutlery on picnic tables, the hum of airplanes overhead, it all faded behind a veil of ice. My legs felt numb, but I forced myself to stand and gather our things as if nothing had happened. I hefted the duffel bag onto my shoulder and gave Elise a gentle smile meant to convey nothing more than gratitude for the weekend getaway. The ride back home was a study in awkward silences and polite murmurs. Grant took the wheel of his sleek SUV, and Elise sat beside him, her voice lilting and warm as she recounted a joke one of our youngest cousins had told that afternoon. I sat in the back seat beside the open window, pretending to care about the detail of which restaurant we might stop at for dinner. I nodded every few seconds, forcing sounds of agreement. All I could focus on was the image burned into my mind, that sleight of hand on her waist, the way her hip dipped into his palm, and the way her lips curved in a secret smile. I stared out at the blur of green and gold as the sun sank behind the trees. My vision swam with memories of our first date, the nervous way I had taken her hand on that paddle boat in Central Park, the shy promises we whispered under the street lamp glow. I remembered the softness of her hips beneath my fingertips, the warmth of her breath on my neck after our first kiss. And now, with one passing brush of flesh between her and my brother, all those things felt tainted. I felt as though someone had poured ink into my heart, turning every good memory into a stain I could never erase. Elise must have sensed my mood shift because she paused mid-laugh and glanced back at me through the rearview mirror. Her smile faltered for the first time, and she mouthed a silent, "Are you okay?" I blinked, shook my head, and managed to say, "I'm fine," though my voice cracked on the last syllable. I prayed she would accept the lie and let it go, that she wouldn't press for reassurance I couldn't give. She turned back to Grant, but I saw the shadow of uncertainty cross her face before she forced another laugh and returned to her stories. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. The breeze fluttered my hair, but it did nothing to cool the fire of betrayal burning in my chest. I imagined 1,000 scenarios. Maybe Grant had misread her body language. Maybe he thought it was a playful gesture between siblings. Maybe Elise had signaled him, a brother-sister joke gone too far. But deep down I knew these justifications were desperate lies. Nothing about the way her hip curved beneath his hand had been accidental. Nothing about the way she smiled had been innocent. By the time we pulled into our driveway, dusk had settled into a deep violet sky studded with the first pale stars of evening. I gathered our bags from the back seat, heart-hammering, and gave the unsteady rescuer's smile I had perfected this weekend. "Thanks for driving," I said to Grant. "Really appreciate it." Grant grinned, ruffled my hair in a brotherly way, and replied, "Anytime, man. Glad you guys could make it." Elise opened the passenger door and placed her hand on my arm, asking, "Hun, are you sure you're okay?" Her thumb brushed my pulse point, a tender gesture that used to calm me. But now it felt like a blade against raw flesh. I forced a nod and squeezed her hand. "Just tired," I lied. We carried our suitcases inside the house in a parade of polite goodbyes. Our cousins waved from the porch, promising to gather soon for a barbecue. I forced smiles for them all, recited the same empty pleasantries. When Elise hugged our mother and whispered a promise to call tomorrow, I waited my turn and embraced her too, feeling the weight of the deception we both knew pulsed between us. Finally, we climbed into bed in our familiar room, silent as ghosts. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling fan, and Elise lay beside me, the sheets rising and falling with her even breaths. Everything felt wrong. I longed to demand answers, to wake her up and force her to tell me what that smile meant. I longed to confront Grant, to wrest the truth from his smug grin. But dread knotted in my stomach. I had no proof beyond my own eyes, and I feared being labeled a jealous fool. So I stayed silent, closed my eyes, and prayed sleep would come. But in the fragile stillness of that night, as the fan whirred above me, I realized nothing would ever be the same. The thread of trust was gone, and in its place lay a chasm of questions I didn't know how to cross. That smile. It haunted me long after the replay of that lakeside moment had faded, echoing in the hollow corridors of my mind at oddest hours. It wasn't a startle or discomfort or a flicker of alarm. There was no recoil when his hand landed on her. Instead, it was a knowing smile, as though they shared some wordless conspiracy. When I closed my eyes at night, I could still see the curve of her lips in that instant, calculating and intimate. It unsettled me more than any shouting match ever could. Sleep became a stranger. My life, once a carefully orchestrated routine of early morning jogs, office meetings, and quiet dinners at home, fractured into restless awakenings at 3 or 4 in the morning, heart pounding, mind racing. I stared at the ceiling, willing the dark shapes of the fan blades to morph into comforting patterns, but all I saw was the silhouette of Grant's hand drifting across Elise's hip. It tormented me like a recurring nightmare I couldn't wake from. During the days, I moved through tasks with mechanical precision. I brewed coffee before dawn, black, the way I liked it, and carried it into our bedroom. Elise was still sleeping, her face soft in the morning light. I wrestled with an urge to shake her awake, to ask, in a calm enough voice, "What is that smile for?" But the words died in my throat. Instead, I placed the mug on the bedside table, pressed a light kiss to her temple, and slipped out while she dreamed. At work, my focus slipped. My team at the firm noticed my distracted nods in meetings, the way I skimmed reports without really reading. I began replaying every second of that weekend. Her elbow resting against his forearm as he passed the potato salad, the way she tilted her head toward him when he told a story around the bonfire. Every laugh, every glance they shared was now under suspicion. In the sterile glow of my computer screen, I kept imagining text threads lighting up her phone, flirty jokes, secret rendezvous, a double life played out in emojis. One evening, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a tinted window. The hollow-eyed man staring back was a stranger. I saw lines at the corners of my eyes I hadn't noticed before, the pale pallor of someone who spent nights wrestling with ghosts instead of sleeping. I felt foolish, consumed by jealousy. What if I was overreacting? What if it had been a harmless flick of the hip, a sibling jest gone wrong? I tried to convince myself that the truth lay in innocence, not betrayal. But my gut never lies, and mine screamed louder with every passing minute. I began to tally the signs I had overlooked. That quiet dinner on Friday night, it came back to me, when Grant had arrived late and Elise greeted him with a quick hug that lingered too long. And the morning after, when she slipped out early for a hike and came back flushed and breathless, refusing to share more than vague descriptions of the trail. Even the way she glowed when she spoke about him struck me then as ordinary, but now felt like a confession of something more. I took to walking through our neighborhood at dusk, hoping the cool air might clarify my thoughts. I passed the elementary school playground where we used to walk our dog together, hand in hand. I imagined twisting back toward home and confronting them both. I pictured the scene, Elise's shock, Grant's smug denial, and me standing in the center, chest heaving, evidence in my palm. But the moment I reached our front gate, fear would seize me. What if I was wrong? What if I lost everything, my wife, my family, my peace, based on a twisted perception? Still, the smile persisted at the edges of my vision. I felt its weight pressing on my chest during work presentations, during coffee breaks, during every heartbeat. I racked my brain for proof, but the evidence was embedded in memory, in the way her hip welcomed his hand, in the silent accord between them. I couldn't bear the idea of a confrontation without something tangible. One night, I found myself in our shared office, the room steeped in the dim glow of a single lamp. I stared at her laptop on the desk, locked with a password I didn't know. Desperation pushed me forward. I remembered her old iPad, the one she used for Pinterest long ago. It was still tucked in the lower shelf, forgotten. My hand shook as I grabbed it and powered it on. It sprang to life without a lock. In that moment, my blood ran cold. The Telegram icon gleamed on the home screen like a red flag. My throat tightened, but I tapped it open. The first chat listed was Grant's name, followed by dozens of unopened messages. I clicked through, each scroll revealing flirtatious banter, jokes so intimate they made me wince. There were links to hotel booking confirmations, snapshots of weekend getaways marked us time, and even a photo of Elise's bedroom, our bedroom, taken from a corner angle, the pillows still unfluffed. I sank into the chair, phone flashes illuminating my face in the dark. Proof lay before me, naked and indisputable. The threads of yellow text formed a tapestry of betrayal, pet names they reserved for no one else, references to inside jokes I had never heard, plans for clandestine meetings. My chest constricted so fiercely I thought I might not breathe. My mind reeled at the depth of their deceit. When Elise slipped into the office behind me later, I barely heard her footsteps. She peered at the screen and gasped, brows lifting in alarm. Her eyes darted between me and the messages. In that flash of recognition, I saw fear in her expression, fear that she had been unmasked, that her carefully cultivated lie had crumbled. I closed the laptop with a sharp snap. "Why?" I whispered, voice trembling. She shrank back, eyes filling with tears. But the sight of her tears now felt hollow. The mask had shattered, and I had crossed the line from suspicion into certainty. The world I had built, a life of mutual trust, of love between husband and wife, of brotherly bonds, lay in ruins at my feet. And in that silent office, bathed in lamplight and the glow of betrayal, I realized the gravity of what I'd uncovered. The smile that haunted me was no longer a memory, it was the catalyst for everything that would follow. Elise's phone was always locked, a digital vault she guarded with a password I had never been able to breach. I tried to convince myself that her privacy was sacred, that a spouse had no right to rummage through another's messages, but desperation drove me past any rational restraint. Every night, I lay awake wondering what secrets she had behind that lock screen. Had I ever truly known her? Or had our years together just been the cleverest illusion? Then one evening, as the sky bled orange behind our curtains, I remembered the old iPad she kept tucked beneath her side of the bed. It lay there forgotten, loaded with recipes and pinned images from years ago, the screen untouched since the day she announced she was moving entirely to her phone. I paused in the doorway of our bedroom, heart hammering, and stared at the device. Its casing was scuffed but familiar, one of the first gifts I gave her after our honeymoon. The memory of her smile at my clumsy attempt to set up parental controls seemed like a relic from a past life. I crept across the carpet and picked up the tablet. The weight of guilt settled in my chest. I knew I was about to violate her trust. Yet I needed to know. I needed proof. My hands trembled as I pressed the power button. The lock screen appeared, but instead of the familiar keypad prompt, I was greeted by her home screen. No password required. Relief and dread jostled inside me like storm-tossed waves. There it was, the Telegram icon, nestled among legitimate apps like Evernote and Dropbox. I tapped it, and the app sprang open. A list of conversations appeared, sorted by recency, and at the very top was a name that made my blood run cold. Grant Thompson. My brother's name. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the chat. I thought of Elise's laugh, how it had echoed so freely by the lake just days before, how I had mistaken that laughter for genuine joy rather than a performance. I swallowed hard and tapped the chat. The screen filled with messages. The first snippet read, "Can't stop thinking about you," followed by a heart emoji. My vision blurred. I scrolled down. There were days' worth of exchanges, text strings stretching back weeks, months. Each message more brazen than the last. "Miss you at night," and "When can I see you again?" Mixed with giggling selfies they had sent one another. Elise in a sundress, hair pinned up, reclining on our couch, Grant with a mischievous grin, leaning against the marble countertop in our kitchen. Photos of overlapping shadows on hotel sheets. Their words hopped off the screen. "Counting the seconds until I'm in your arms," and "Your skin is my favorite view." My chest tightened into a knot so fierce I thought I might choke. My proof lay there in binary code. I tapped one photo. It was our bedroom, the bed unmade, the morning light spilling through the blinds. Elise had taken it from an angle that included my guitar leaning against the wall and my running shoes in the corner, details that whispered familiarity. My betrayal was documented in high resolution. I scrolled further. There were messages about reservations at boutique hotels in the city, text strings about stolen weekends, with exact dates, July 18th at the Meridian, August 2nd at the Rosewood Suites. My stomach churned at the realization that while I believed we were planning anniversary dinners together, Elise was mistaking those nights for tryst with my brother. I felt bile rise in my throat. My shock turned to rage. I thought of the lines I had drawn on the pavement of our driveway, the path we traced hand in hand when we moved into this house. Now I saw those lines as the walls of a prison built from lies I had willingly walked into. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the back of the iPad, as though the device itself were the traitor. Then I saw another message, one that sliced deeper than all the flirty banter, an exchange between Elise and Grant about my upcoming birthday. Elise asked Grant to arrange something special. Grant replied, "Don't worry, I've got a plan. She'll never suspect it's me, not with you playing the loving husband." Their collusion cut me like a serrated blade. They had rehearsed this betrayal, choreographed around my blind trust. I leaned back and took a ragged breath. Every image, every word, every promise in those messages was a dagger aimed at my heart. I felt the years of our marriage twist into a charred ribbon of deceit. I stared at the final message. "See you tonight, after the kids are asleep. Can't wait." I could almost hear their whispered laughter in the dark corners of our home. A sharp knock on the bedroom door startled me. My hand shook, and I dropped the iPad, the tablet skidding to a halt on the carpet with a thud. Elise's voice drifted through the wood panel. "Honey, I made dinner. You okay?" I stared at our bedroom door, heart pounding so loud I feared she could hear it through the walls. I couldn't meet her eyes. I couldn't face her. I picked up the iPad and slipped it behind my back just as she flung open the door. She stood there in her apron, flour dusting her cheeks, eyes bright with innocent hope. I felt like a monster and a victim in the same moment. She asked me again if I was okay. I felt the device heavy against my side, a confession I dared not release. "I'm fine," I said, voice flat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand explanations, to rip the truth from her lips. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more time to calibrate the depth of this betrayal, to build my case in silence. So I nodded and followed her into the kitchen, pinning a smile on my face that felt as brittle as dry leaves. As I set the iPad down on the counter, my pulse hammered. The hidden window into her phone had revealed everything. My innocence, my trust, my love, they lay in tatters around me. And as Elise reached to brush my hair back from my forehead, a gesture that once felt tender, my skin crawled. I realized I stood at a crossroads. One path led to confronting the betrayal and shattering our family forever. The other was retreat into denial, a living death that would eat me from the inside out. I took a steadying breath and chose neither. Instead, I asked, "What's for dinner?" and smiled. It was the most poisonous lie I had ever told. I said nothing. I smiled at breakfast as Elise poured coffee into our favorite mugs, porcelain, with little blue birds on the rim, and set them on the table just the way I liked, a dash of cream and 2 sugars. She hummed a light tune as she buttered toast, unaware of the storm gathering behind my calm eyes. I folded my hands in front of me, leaned forward, and said, "Thanks, Han," in the warmest tone I could muster. She slid a plate of scrambled eggs toward me, bright yellow under the morning light. "Busy day today?" she asked, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. I nodded and took a bite, savoring the familiar taste as if nothing had changed. Later, I kissed her forehead before she dashed out to yoga class, slipping my arms around her in a gentle hug that felt like wearing a mask. Her skin was soft against my cheek, exactly as it had been countless times before, and I almost believed the lie, that everything was fine. She smiled and said, "Love you," then was gone, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen. I lingered a moment, listening to the drip of the faucet, the distant rumble of traffic beyond the walls. I picked up my coffee cup again, tracing the tiny crack at the handle's base, the one we had agreed not to repair because it made the cup feel homey. Once she left, I slipped on my jacket and headed to the office. My mind buzzed with tasks that no longer pertained to work, contacting divorce attorneys, gathering bank statements, and rerouting paychecks. I'd spent the previous night splitting our joint accounts into separate entities. I had a new bank card hidden in my wallet, an account under only my name, funded by the direct deposit that Elise would never see. I'd logged into our shared inheritance account, money left to me by my mother, and transferred half to a secure trust under my sole control. Each transaction felt like removing a stone from the foundation of our marriage, and yet I performed them with the same precision I used to file expense reports at work. At the office, colleagues greeted me with nods. I shook hands and offered smiles, discussing Q3 projections and client deliverables. All the while, my phone buzzed quietly in my jacket pocket with their messages, Elise sending heart emojis to Grant, responses so quick they betrayed an eager anticipation. I ignored the notifications, pretending they were spam. I focused on spreadsheets, but every few minutes my cursor hovered over the Accounts tab, a reminder of the clandestine empire I was building to distance myself from her. By midday, I excused myself for a doctor's appointment, a ruse to maintain normalcy. In the waiting room, I opened the tablet I'd borrowed from the office library and revisited her hidden chat. The messages had multiplied. New hotel confirmations, plans for next spring, secret nicknames that once sounded romantic but now rang hollow. I scrolled through captions of photos she had sent him. Her laughing in our living room, her head thrown back, hair cascading like waterfalls over the cushions. I imagined those same photos pinned to his walls, relics of a liaison that had shredded the trust between us. After the appointment, I stopped by a copy shop to make hard copies of every incriminating text thread, every digital receipt, every screenshot. I labored over the printer, feeding page after page into the tray, my fingers stained with toner. I watched as each sheet emerged, black text on white paper, proof of their betrayal laid bare. I stacked them neatly in a manila folder labeled Evidence, though I dared not think of what I would do with it just yet. Having that folder in my hands felt empowering, a tangible rehearsed script that would guide my exit. That evening, I arrived home before Elise. I unlocked the door with a key she didn't realize I'd duplicated, hung my coat in the entryway, and stepped into the living room. She was sprawled on the couch, texting, one leg tucked beneath her. She looked up as I entered and beamed. "You're home early. How was your appointment?" I shrugged off my shoes and grinned. "Went well. Just routine." I plucked a cushion from the chair and sat across from her, pretending to read the headlines on the television remote. She set her phone aside and leaned toward me, the soft light illuminating her features. "You okay?" she asked, concern creasing her brow. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. "Yeah," I said, then more firmly, "I'm fine." She relaxed and leaned her head against my shoulder. I felt the weight of her body, the warmth of her breath, and part of me ached to believe in our past, in the vows we once whispered. But beneath that ache was a steel resolve. I would protect myself now, even if it meant destroying everything we had built. I stayed silent through our quiet dinner, the clink of silverware on china echoing in the kitchen. She laughed at a joke on TV, and I mustered laughter in response. Afterwards, I did the dishes. She dried and put them away, humming. I realized I was performing a carefully choreographed dance. My steps measured, my smile rehearsed, every motion designed to conceal my true intentions until the moment I chose to reveal them. As I washed the last plate, I thought of the folder hidden in my briefcase, of the messages waiting to be unleashed. I thought of the moment when Elise would look at me and understand that I had never truly been hers to betray. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and walked toward our bedroom, where she had left the door ajar. I paused in the doorway and watched her brush her hair in the mirror, unaware of the mask I had sewn across my own face. I whispered goodnight and kissed her cheek. Her perfume, jasmine and sandalwood, should have felt comforting, but it only reminded me of her duplicity. She closed her eyes and smiled, resting her head on the pillow. I turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind me. In the silent hallway, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Tomorrow I would continue building my fortress, brick by brick, shielded by lies dressed as love. And when the mask finally slipped away, they would see the truth. I reached out to Camilla on a muggy Thursday morning, the calendar on my phone blinking reminders of court dates and depositions, but this needed to happen first. We chose a small cafe halfway between our homes, the Willow Bean, with its mismatched chairs and the smell of freshly ground espresso beans thick in the air. I arrived early, nerves jangling like loose change in my pocket. I ordered a black coffee and waited, watching the door, rehearsing in my mind how to begin. Every instinct screamed to barge in, to fling open her umbrella and demand justice. but I forced myself to breathe and keep my composure. When Camilla walked in, she looked smaller than I expected. Her hair, dark and sleek, was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she wore a simple gray blouse. Her eyes were bloodshot, shadows beneath them like bruises from sleepless nights. She paused when she saw me, hesitation flickering across her features as though I might be someone else. I stood, offered a tentative smile, and gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, clutching her tote bag like a lifeline. I slammed my coffee down, not aggressively, but with enough force to startle even myself, and slid the iPad across the table. She stared at the device as if it were a dangerous animal. "What is this?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Proof. Of everything." I tapped the screen, and the images she knew so well blinked into focus. Elise's bedroom, the curated selfies, the flirty texts. Her hand flew to her mouth, posture collapsing as though the weight of those messages had struck her mid-step. Tears glistened, but she blinked them back. "Oh my God," she breathed. I thought. It was just stress. Work deadlines. Late nights in the office. I felt my own eyes burn. "Work stress doesn't send heart emojis and arrange secret weekend getaways," I said quietly. "What did you think when she told you she loved you? When she called you pet names?" Camilla's shoulders trembled as she swallowed. I thought she was going through something. I thought I was helping her, being supportive. I had no idea it was more. Her voice cracked, and she squinted at the screen again. Not him. My husband. Not my brother-in-law. We sat in silence for a moment, the cafe's lazy chatter and clink of spoons fading into a dull roar in my ears. I reached into my suit pocket and brought out the manila folder I had prepared. I put it on the table, next to the iPad. These are records of every transaction she tried to manipulate, our shared accounts, inheritance funds, travel expenses, I said. And here. I flipped it open, papers rustling. The hotel receipts, the credit card charges, screenshots of her messages begging him for more money when things got tight. Her hand shook as she reached for the folder. She flipped through the pages, lips moving silently, as though praying for the evidence to vanish. When she looked up, her eyes were red and fierce. "I can't believe I missed it. I can't believe he did this to me." Her voice held a raw edge, a blend of shame and anger. "Thank you for showing me. I don't know what to say." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll take action." She nodded, determination replacing despair. "I will. I've already found a lawyer. I'm filing for separation, and I want custody arrangements sorted out before he can contest them." Relief flooded me, but I buried it under a layer of resolve. "Good. And I've given mine the same." I paused, then added, "If you need anything, documents, testimony, call me. We're in this together." A faint, grateful smile flickered across her face. A barista wheeled the coffee cart by our table. Camilla grabbed her untouched latte and whispered, "Please, have one." I shook my head. "Not today." She sipped slowly, and the caramel sweetness must have tasted bitter on her tongue. I watched her, imagining the woman she used to be, quiet, supportive, trusting, and the version sitting before me now, wounded, wary, but unbroken. When we left the cafe, the sky had darkened to pewter. Raindrops began to patter against the windows of our cars. We lingered at the curb, neither wanting to retreat to separate lives so soon. She placed a hand on my arm. "Thank you," she said again, voice trembling, "for being brave enough to tell me." I nodded, the words caught in my throat. I didn't feel brave, I admitted. I felt destroyed. But we deserve better than lies. We embraced, two survivors clasped together in the storm's eye. The rain intensified, but under its rhythmic drumming, I felt something shift, like the first stirrings of hope after a long drought. We parted with a final nod and climbed into our cars. As I turned the key in the ignition, I looked at the folder of evidence on the passenger seat, then at the windshield streaked with rain. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time since that lakeside betrayal, I felt a measure of clarity, a sense that I was no longer alone in this fight. The storm was far from over, but the clouds had parted enough to reveal a sliver of sky. And for now, that would have to be enough. I waited for Elise to return from one of her yoga retreats with a cool detachment, as if our carefully constructed life continued unchanged. In reality, every sunrise brought me closer to the confrontation I'd rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. I had loaded my phone with a hidden call recorder, the lawyer's card nestled in my wallet, and the folder packed with evidence ready at my side. When I heard the front door click behind her that evening, I was sitting at the dining table, a half-finished glass of whiskey in front of me, the streetlight beyond the window casting long bars of light across the floor. She stepped in quietly, as if she feared I might be waiting to pounce. She wore leggings and a loose tank top damp with her workout, hair twisted into a messy bun. She looked tired, but as she caught my eye, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, passed across her face before she schooled her expression into concern. "Hey," she said softly, hanging her bag on the coat rack. "You okay? You look tense." I tapped the recorder and slid the folder closer. The whiskey sat untouched now, the burn of stored anger hotter than any alcohol. "We need to talk," I said. My voice sounded unnatural, calm and clipped. She paused, then nodded, picking her way across the dark wood floor toward me. She perched on the edge of the chair opposite mine, her gaze darting between my face and the folder. "About what?" she asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Without meeting her eyes, I opened the folder and spread the pages across the table, screenshots of chat threads, printed emails, hotel invoices, bank statements. Each sheet glared up at her in stark black and white. I watched her fingers tremble as she touched the edge of a page showing a booking confirmation for the Meridian, dated months earlier. "Explain this," I said, voice softer now, but no less deadly. Elise's lips parted, and she blinked twice, as though coming to from a daze. She began, voice unsteady. "What are you doing?" She swallowed and straightened. "Is this some kind of joke?" I pressed a thumbnail of our bedroom photograph toward her. "A joke would be funny. This is proof." My finger hovered over a text where she had called him, my dearest, followed by an emoji I didn't even recognize. "You've been sleeping with my brother." She shook her head, eyes wide in shock. "That's not what it looks like." She swallowed again, voice trembling. I can explain." I lifted my chin and clicked record. "Go ahead." She glanced at the recorder, panic flickering across her features. She licked her lips and sighed, eyes filling with tears. "It was a mistake," she said, reaching for the pages as if to crumple them. "I never meant for it to go this far. We were just confused. It started innocently. He was supporting me through my stress, and I felt understood in a way I hadn't in years." Her words stumbled and fell away as she remembered the evidence pinned between us. I stood and circled the table, hands in my pockets. The recorder picked up the scrape of my shoes on hardwood. She looked up at me, tears glistening in the lamplight. "Do you love me?" I asked, voice gentle but cold. Her hands clutched the edge of the table. "Of course I do," she cried. "I thought I did." I shook my head. "Then why?" She drew in a shaky breath, tears spilling over. "Because I felt invisible. Because you were always at work or with your family, and when Grant paid attention to me, I let it happen." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm sorry." I swallowed hard and pointed to the folder. "And the money? All those transactions routed through your account to his." She flinched. "I needed help. I thought, if he felt invested in me, maybe he'd support me when I told you I was pregnant." Her shoulders slumped. "It was never about the money. I swear." I leaned forward, pressing the photograph of her bedroom between us. "That photo isn't an accident, Elise. You sent it. You wanted him there." She burst into sobs, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I'm so sorry." I felt a hollow ache where my heart used to be. I bent and picked up her trembling hands, feeling her skin slick with sweat and tears. "Do you know what you've done?" I whispered. "You've destroyed everything." Through muffled cries, she nodded. "I know." I straightened and moved back to stand at the window. The night air pressed against the glass, offering a cool reprieve from the heat of betrayal. I closed my eyes and exhaled. "I've already called my lawyer," I said. "I'm filing for divorce. You'll need to go through him if you want anything from me." Her head snapped up, red-rimmed eyes searching mine. "Please," she pleaded. "Don't do this. We can fix it." I turned to face her, voice steady. "No. You chose this." I pointed at the recorder. "Everything you said here goes to my lawyer. I don't want to hear another word." She rose slowly, hands trembling at her sides. "What about the baby?" she whispered. I closed my eyes. "I'll get a paternity test. Everything else comes later." She sank back onto the chair, shoulders heaving. The silence stretched until only the hum of the refrigerator in the next room and the distant siren of an ambulance broke in the quiet. Then I walked to the door, paused, and looked at her one last time. "Goodbye, Elise." I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and felt the weight of each footstep as I walked away. Behind me, her sobs filled the empty apartment. The door clicked shut, and the world outside resumed its rhythm, but inside me, a fracture had widened into a chasm I dared not cross again. The first night in the hotel room, I lay awake listening to the hum of the air conditioner, its white noise a poor substitute for the familiar creaks and sighs of our home. I hadn't brought the iPad with me, too painful to see her messages, too tempting to check again. Still, I felt its absence like a phantom limb, reminding me of all the secrets it held. Instead, I unfolded the evidence folder on the small desk, each page a brick in the wall I was building between my past life and whatever came next. Morning came with thin light seeping through the heavy drapes. I showered, dressed in jeans and a crisp button-down, and ordered breakfast to my room. The waiter knocked, set down a tray, and hesitated when he saw my vacant gaze. "Anything else, sir?" he asked. I shook my head, thanked him, and closed the door. I ate mechanically, eggs over easy, bacon crisp, coffee lukewarm. With each bite I felt more removed from the man I used to be, husband, brother, son. Now I was simply a betrayed husband, untethered and adrift. I spent the morning on calls with my lawyer, strategizing next steps, filing for temporary residence orders, setting dates for mediation, and coordinating with Camilla's attorney. As I spoke, I noticed my hands were steady, my voice calm. The storm inside had settled into a cold, efficient focus. I realized that betrayal had a way of sharpening the mind, turning emotion into calculus, measure the damage, plan the counterattack, protect what remained. After hanging up, I looked at the clock. 3 hours had passed since breakfast. I needed fresh air. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the hotel's lobby, passing the velvet ropes and polished marble floors. Out on the sidewalk, the city was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling past, pedestrians hurrying to offices, the smell of exhaust mingling with freshly brewed street vendor coffee. I let the energy of the morning crowd wash over me, a current pulling me forward. I wandered into a small park across the street. A row of cherry blossoms lined the walkway, petals drifting down like silent confessions. A man jogged by with his dog. A barista called out a cheerful greeting to a regular. For a moment, I envied their simplicity. I found a bench in the shade and sat, unfolding the napkin from my coffee cup and folding it absently. I thought of Elisa's text about her alleged miscarriage, how she wrote that she felt like a part of herself had died. I wondered if she had lied about that, too, manipulating me one last time to stop the divorce. The idea made my stomach twist into knots. As I sat, my phone buzzed. It was Camilla, confirming a meeting later that afternoon to share depositions and compare notes. I typed a quick reply and set the phone down. A pigeon strutted near the bench, pecking at crumbs. I watched it for a while, its head jerking this way and that, alert to danger. I felt a kinship with that wary bird, always on guard, never fully at ease. A group of children ran past, their laughter echoing against the skyscrapers. One small girl paused as she saw me, curiosity in her wide eyes, and held up a wilted flower she had picked, pink petals heavy on a thin stem. "Here," she said, extending it. I hesitated, then took it, marveling at its fragile beauty. "Thank you," I said softly. She smiled, and her mother called, "Come on, Emmy." The girl ran off, dropping the stem in my lap as she joined her family. I cradled the flower, petals in my palm, and felt something soften inside me. For the first time since uncovering the affair, I allowed myself to see beyond the pain, to the ways the world still offered unexpected grace. The kid's innocent gesture reminded me that kindness existed outside deceit, that life continued in small wonders. I tucked the flower into my jacket pocket and stood. Back at the hotel, I checked into my room, gathered the evidence folder, and headed to a nearby cafe where Camilla had chosen to meet me. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a high-top table near the window, laptop open and stacks of papers around her. Her eyes lifted when I entered, and I saw recognition and relief in her gaze. We exchanged cautious smiles and ordered coffees. I placed my folder next to hers. "I brought more," I said. "Bank statements, voicemail transcripts, the paternity test request I drafted." She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I got your note," she said, "and I forwarded everything to my lawyer. They're preparing for a hearing next week." We spent the next hour comparing documents, marking discrepancies, and clarifying our shared narrative. Siblings turned schemers, spouses who victimized us, legal teams preparing to counter every hidden move. Occasionally, one of us would look up, meeting the other's eye, and offer a hollow laugh or a tight shrug, our way of acknowledging the absurdity of it all. When the cafe began to fill with lunchtime crowds, we packed up our papers. I felt a surge of gratitude for Camilla's solidarity, for the unexpected allyship forged from the wreckage of their affair. "Thank you," I said again, "for believing me and stepping forward." She shook her head. "I should have seen it sooner, but I couldn't without you showing me the proof." I smiled, a small, genuine expression that took me by surprise. "We'll get through this," I said. "One step at a time." She nodded, gathering her laptop. "Yes, one step at a time." Outside, the midday sun was bright enough to cast clear shadows. I felt the warmth on my face, and in that light, I resolved to keep moving forward, to rebuild my life piece by piece, guided by truth rather than illusion. I slipped the wilted flower from my pocket and placed it on the table. A symbol, I decided, of the fragility that gives way to resilience. As I walked back to the hotel, I felt perhaps the first flicker of peace since that fateful lakeside moment. The betrayal still burned, but it no longer consumed me entirely. I had allies, plans, and a new understanding of my own strength. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer walking it alone. And in that knowledge, I found the courage to face whatever came next, whatever storms still gathered on the horizon. The text arrived just as dusk settled into the room, the soft glow of my desk lamp illuminating its promise. Elise had sent it, a grainy sonogram image accompanied by a caption that read, "We're having a baby." My stomach clenched the moment I saw the words. After everything, she was pregnant. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, palms slick with a sudden chill. I had not touched her since early October, weeks before I uncovered the affair. Yet here was proof she believed I would believe in this new life she claimed to carry. I refused to respond immediately. Instead, I placed my phone face down on the desk and leaned back in my chair, eyes closing as I struggled to steady my breath. I remembered the moment when Elise first told me she was pregnant years ago, the way her hand had pressed to her belly, her face alight with awe. That memory now felt like someone else's, an echo from a life that had dissolved in betrayal. How dare she wield that dream against me now, after all I'd learned? I reached for the file folder I had stashed in the bottom drawer of my desk. It contained everything: printed chat logs, bank statements rerouted to Grant, hotel invoices, the evidence of their months-long conspiracy. I flipped through the pages until I found the one where she had texted him days ago, complaining that she couldn't afford a quiet weekend getaway. There was no mention of pregnancy then, only jokes about money. Now she claimed to be carrying my child. Anger flared, followed by a knot of despair. I pictured Elise curled on our bed, hand on her swelling stomach, rehearsing the lie. Perhaps she thought a baby would bind me to her again, stave off the divorce I had already set in motion. Yet I refused to be manipulated further. I had already rerouted my paychecks, opened separate accounts, and secured legal counsel for every possible contingency, including paternity tests. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer, Kevin. The phone rang twice before his calm voice answered. "David, something I need to discuss?" he asked. I glanced at the sonogram again, stomach twisting. "My wife says she's pregnant," I said, voice tight. "I want to add a clause in the filing requiring an immediate DNA test." There was a pause. "I was expecting you," Kevin said. Her claim could be a last-ditch effort to delay the proceedings. I leaned forward, tapping the desk. "Exactly. Draft the amendment. And notify her attorney that we demand paternity confirmation within 5 days of any birth announcement. No extensions." "Consider it done," he replied. "I'll file today." He hung up, leaving me alone with the sonogram. The weight of that little black and white blob felt monstrous now, a weapon turned against me. I closed my laptop and rose, pacing the length of the room. I had protected my finances, my home, my family's legacy. Now I would protect my own bloodline from the deception that had wreaked havoc on my life. Later that night, I sat at the dining table in my apartment, the evidence folder beside a fresh cup of coffee. I opened the folder and inserted the new sonogram printout among the other documents. In neat, typed labels beneath each page, I had my notes. October 3rd, last intimate encounter confirmed. October 5, present. No evidence of conception dates. November 1st, alleged sonogram. Inconsistent file metadata. I closed the folder with a decisive snap. I stared at the wall clock, ticking toward midnight. The city outside was quiet now, windows dark except for the occasional flicker of television light. I thought of Elise sleeping in our bedroom, unaware or perhaps unmoved that I had seen through her final ploy. A part of me felt pity for her, but the larger part was steeled against any empathy. She had shattered our vows. She did not deserve mercy. The next morning, I awoke early and drafted a brief, professional email to Elise's attorney, attaching the amendment language and reiterating our demand for an expedited paternity test. I considered adding a note, something more personal, more cutting, but I resisted. This was business now, devoid of sentiment. I pressed send and felt a cautious sense of relief. The rules of engagement were clear. Claims of parenthood had to meet the same evidentiary standards as embezzlement or fraud. Over the following days, Elise inundated me with messages. Pleas for compassion, promises of fidelity now that this life tied us together, mentions of fear and loneliness. She even sent a link to a pregnancy app she had downloaded, showing countdowns and weekly fetal development updates. But she never once addressed the absence of any mention in her previous conversations with Grant or in the iPad logs I held as proof. I refused to engage. Instead, I focused on the legal process. I met with Kevin, who confirmed that the amendment was in place and that our court date had been advanced. We reviewed witness lists and evidence, strategized about presenting the affair logs first to establish pattern and motive. Once that foundation was set, the sonogram claim would crumble under the weight of timestamps and metadata. One afternoon, I took a break and walked to the park where I had first sat with the wilted flower. The cherry blossoms had returned in full bloom, petals carpeting the ground like a rosy snowfall. I found the same bench and sat, closing my eyes as a breeze stirred the branches overhead. A young couple strolled by, her hand in his, laughter bright as bells. They paused at the sight of the blossoms. He plucked a fallen petal and tucked it behind her ear. My chest ached with memory of tenderness that now felt impossible to reclaim. I opened my eyes to the blue sky and vowed silently that I would not let this final deception unmoor me. I would proceed with unwavering resolve, as I had from the moment I discovered the affair. No sonogram could entangle me again. No tearful confession could sway me. My path was clear: divorce, settlement, and then rebuilding a life defined by honesty rather than illusion. When I returned home, I found Elise's last message waiting. It read simply, "Please, for the baby's sake." I tapped read, then stared at the three little dots indicating her typing. But I never replied. I powered off my phone, walked to the window, and let the afternoon sun warm my face. In that light, I realized I was free of the web sheet and Grant had woven. Betrayed, but no longer bound. My future would be guided by truth, and no false promise of new life would ever ensnare me again. 2 weeks after Elise's declaration of pregnancy, I received her message just as I was settling into my office chair one crisp Thursday morning. "I'm so sorry," it read. "I lost the baby." My chest tightened, as though I'd been punched in an empty stomach. The words blurred on the screen, an echo of pain I was supposed to feel, but couldn't. I stared at them for a long moment, waiting for something inside me to break. Instead, I felt a strange, cold relief. Relief that the trap she'd set could no longer spring, relief that the paternity question would be moot, and relief that the final manipulation was over. I closed my laptop and pushed back from my desk. Papers fluttered to the floor. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the distant clacking of keyboards. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and covered my face with my hands. The folder of evidence lay open beside me, rows of chat logs, hotel invoices, bank statements. I recognized some of the dates of the affair overlapped with the alleged conception window. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was damning. I thought of Elise curled on our bed, clutching her stomach in anguish, tears streaming down her cheeks. I pictured her rehearsing the miscarriage message, imagining my concern, my guilt, all the emotions she planned to exploit. It sickened me to believe she had used a fabricated tragedy to delay the divorce, to pull at my heartstrings one last time. But the absence of all mention of pregnancy in her communications with Grant was proof enough. Their entire relationship had been meticulously documented, until this. I took a deep breath and opened the email draft I had been composing for her attorney. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I searched for the right words, something that conveyed disbelief and finality without descending into cruelty. Finally, I typed, "Your client's recent claim of miscarriage appears disconnected from any prior documentation, including her own conversations with Mr. Thompson. We hereby request immediate medical verification or withdrawal of the claim. If no proof is provided within 5 business days, we will consider the matter closed and proceed with divorce and settlement discussions under the standard timelines." I hit send. The email whooshed into her attorney's inbox, leaving no room for negotiation. I sat back and closed my eyes, allowing the tension in my shoulders to unravel slightly. Later that afternoon, Camilla called. Her voice was cautious, gentle. David, I just read about the miscarriage. Her tone held sorrow and confusion. I'm so sorry you have to go through this again. I rubbed my temple. She did it for delay, I said flatly. I'm not falling for it. She sighed, and I could almost see her exhale over the connection. I believe you. It sounds like a last-ditch lie. Exactly. I stood and paced my study, the hardwood floor cold beneath my feet. I'm ready to finalize everything. Temporary orders, asset division, custody considerations, whatever it takes. Camilla nodded. I'll move forward with my petition. We can coordinate witnesses, her doctor, her own statements. He'll have to explain the discrepancy. Hanging up, I felt a small measure of vindication. Each step I took dismantled the illusion Elise had erected. I glanced at the clock. Almost 6. I decided to clear my head with a run before dinner. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet leaves from a sudden rain earlier in the day. I jogged along the familiar route past the elementary school and down the tree-lined boulevard. My breath came in steady puffs, my muscles warmed by exertion. As I ran, I cataloged the tasks still ahead. Collect final evidence, attend settlement conference, secure my own residence, and ensure the divorce decree was issued promptly. By the time I returned home, dusk had settled into deep blue. I stepped into the living room and found the evidence folder still on the coffee table, along with a lone vase of white lilies, Elise's favorite, that I had forgotten to remove. I knelt and picked up a petal, its ivory softness startling against the polished wood. I slipped the lilies into a plastic bag and carried them to the kitchen trash, pausing at the doorway to glance back at the vase. It stood empty now, a silent testament to the false hope she had tried to plant. I poured myself a glass of water and checked my phone. No new messages. No pleas or apologies. For the first time in weeks, I felt a calm certainty. The divorce would move forward unimpeded, her final deception exposed and dismissed. I would close this chapter of my life and begin the next, one defined by honesty and self-respect. That night, I prepared dinner in the quiet kitchen, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a simple salad. I ate slowly, paying attention to every flavor, every texture, a practice in presence I'd long abandoned. I thought of the life I would build once this was over. Mornings without dread, evenings without secrets, a home where trust could grow anew. After dinner, I sat on the couch and opened the living room windows, letting the night breeze drift in. A street lamp cast a gentle glow across the floor, and somewhere in the distance, a lone car rolled by. I leaned forward and opened the evidence folder one last time. Beneath the miscarriage email, the pages of compiled proof remained, immutable records of betrayal. I closed the folder and placed it on the lower shelf, a monument to what I had survived. Curling into a blanket, I reached for the remote and turned on a news program I hadn't seen in weeks. The anchor's voice droned on about world events, trivial and urgent in equal measure. I let the words wash over me like a lullaby. As my eyelids grew heavy, I thought of tomorrow's hearing, of the lawyers gathering in sterile conference rooms, of final signatures and sealed documents. And then, at last, I allowed myself to believe that I had endured the worst, and that what awaited me on the other side of this devastation was something better, a life rebuilt on truth, free of illusions. With that thought, I closed my eyes and slept, feeling, for the first time in a long while, a flicker of genuine peace. 2 years have passed since I lost my mother and father in that fatal car accident. I still remember the weight of my grief when Elise held my hand at the funeral, her grip warm and supposedly comforting. And when Grant gave that eulogy, his eyes glistening with tears I now know were tears of guilt. I believed I had a family then, united in loss. Now I walk alone, but stronger than I ever imagined. After the divorce was finalized, I moved into a modest apartment a few blocks from our old home. Almost everything I owned fit into a rented storage unit, furniture I'd painstakingly selected, photographs of vacations that felt like another life, knickknacks Elise had collected. Letting go of that past was painful, but necessary. Each box I unloaded in this empty space felt like a shard of glass I pulled from my skin. With every piece, I was reborn. Therapy became my sanctuary. Twice a week, I sat across from Dr. Harper, a gentle woman with silver hair and a calm presence. I unspooled the story of betrayal, deceit, and final liberation. At first, I spoke in clipped sentences, my shoulders tight, voice contained. Gradually, as trust grew, I let walls crumble. I cried over the brother I lost and over the wife I once loved. I discovered that vulnerability was not weakness. It was the very thing that made my healing possible. Physical training helped too. I joined a boxing gym where the rhythmic thud of gloves against the heavy bag became a meditation. My muscles grew leaner, my reflexes sharper, but it was the act of delivering each strike that felt most liberating. Channeled fury transformed into controlled power. Outside the ring, I carried that discipline into every aspect of life. Meticulous budgeting, thoughtful meals, early morning runs along the riverfront. In mastering my body, I reclaimed agency over my mind. Every Sunday, I visit Auntie Margot for dinner. She's my mother's older sister, stern but loving, with eyes that miss nothing. Her home is a refuge of memory, framed family portraits lining the hallway, her famous lavender-scented cookies cooling on the counter, floral wallpaper faded by time. We sit at her oak table, plates steaming with comfort food, and talk about everything and nothing. She asks about my job, my workouts, my dreams. Sometimes she pauses, her gaze piercing, and says simply, "I'm proud of you, David." Those words anchor me more than I can express. Camilla remains a steadfast friend. We exchange occasional texts, updates on legal paperwork settled, birthdays of the children we never had, new books to recommend. Once, we met for lunch and laughed over memories of Grant's disastrous attempts at cooking and Elise's endless Pinterest projects. I realized then that our shared trauma had evolved into an unexpected camaraderie, a testament to resilience. We are survivors, not victims. This morning, as sunlight filtered through my new curtains, I made coffee and sat on my balcony overlooking the city skyline. The world felt vast and alive, full of possibilities I'd once believed unattainable. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss. "Can you present next week? The board wants your insights." I smiled, opportunity and trust restored in my professional life. I typed back, "Absolutely." Later, I'll head to the gym for sparring, then meet a colleague for brunch at a cafe I discovered last month. Tomorrow, I'll attend a community fundraiser for a local shelter, a cause that struck a chord when I volunteered last year. Each plan, each commitment, is a stitch in the fabric of my renewed identity, woven from honesty and intention rather than illusion and fear. I think back to that final moment in Elise's apartment, when I closed the door and heard her sobs echoing in the hallway. I thought my heart would never heal, that I'd forever carry the scars of that betrayal. But healing came in increments, through bricks of therapy, weights of training, warmth of chosen family. I am still shaped by that pain, but no longer defined by it. Tonight, I'll call my friend Mark to join me for a movie, a simple celebration of freedom. And before I sleep, I'll journal about gratitude, the morning light, the taste of real coffee, the cadence of my own heartbeat, steady and sure. I'll rest in the knowledge that betrayal nearly broke me, yet led me here, whole, resilient, and unafraid to trust again.